Ginty was born into a small country town with a tight-knit community. It was here she went to preschool, primary school, and then high school. Ginty had all her friends and family here and felt a great sense of belonging, but the opportunities were limited. Ginty's parents had never put pressure on her to attend university, so when she finished school, she didn't have any structure or plan. Ginty's parents had given her so much agency in deciding her own future that it left her confused. Instead, Ginty felt expectations from the teachers at the private school she went to, and also from her community. Ginty applied for university because she felt like that was what she should be doing, but when her best friend moved away to join the army, she felt as though she was now exposed to the real world, as she had now lost her safety net and security of her best friend. Ginty's exposure resulted in her deferring uni after the acceptance of a job application. She packed her bags and moved to New Zealand for the winter. This was such a crucial time in her life. She was leaving her family home and all the places she felt safe in. Ginty found disembedding challenging. She was homesick and constantly questioning her decision. This 6-month trip turned into a 3-year adventure where Ginty travelled around the world and became completely independent. Eventually, Ginty returned back to Australia and her family, where she found it just as challenging to readjust to everyday life. After spending a year getting her finances sorted, she left to volunteer in Thailand. It opened her eyes to the opportunities and privileges she had growing up. This was also a critical moment for her upon realising she needed to take advantage of these opportunities and privileges. Ginty applied for university once again and was accepted. Ginty cut her trip short and flew back to Australia. Within 2 weeks of arriving home, she'd moved into an apartment on the Gold Coast and started university. It was a huge change for Ginty, but so far she is loving learning again and feels like she has made the right decision. Amelia was born in 1993 in the quaint areas of North Sydney. Shortly after, she moved to the Central Coast, where she grew up with her 2 parents and 2 younger brothers. The concept of family played an important role in Amelia's life, and so she always grew up having a close relationship with other members of her family, even distant relatives. Her father being a successful builder and the rest of her family having strong creative drives meant that Amelia was often moving around to different areas of the Central Coast and made a home with her family in many different houses. Her teen years were spent with many of her closest friends. It was in these years that social mobility was of high value to her. However, in 2010, when she was 16 years old, her family started to break down after a dramatic incident took place. This placed a lot of stress on the family, and her parents separated and began their own lives apart from each other. By the time Amelia began her first year at university in Sydney, the family structure had completely diminished, and her sense of belonging in a world she was always so familiar with started to perish. She moved out of home where she was closer to university and made a new life and new friends in Sydney. Looking back, Amelia realised this was a critical point in her life. In trying to juggle family issues, work and study, the stress began to catch up on Amelia, and at this point in time, she and her housemate, as well as best friend, who was experiencing similar issues, decided that a change had to be made. Amelia decided to apply for Griffith University and got accepted for an apartment in Surfers Paradise. It was here where she met new friends and adapted to a more cosmopolitan lifestyle. Within 2 months, Amelia had been accepted for a Bachelor of Psychology at Griffith University and is now living happily on the Gold Coast. It is evident throughout each individual's passage of transition that biographical themes of mobility, belonging, home, and sociality characterise their development. The significance of Ginty's relationship to local space and place, through which her progression from physical dependence of her best friend and community to total independence by disembedding from her family, friends, and community, recognises her orientation towards a cosmopolitan lifestyle. Her transition emphasises a strong desire to leave the locality of her family and community, where life is seemingly unopportunistic, and forge her identity where economical and educational resources are more accessible. Recurrent themes on the meaning of home is evident throughout Amelia's transition. Firstly, home being a centre for family life, safety, relaxation, and a place where time and space are controlled. Amelia's initial progression, despite constant changes in locality, was directed primarily around the idea of home being a physical construct through which social structural forces are forged. However, the breakdown of this construct resulted in an alteration in pathways in response to changing realities of home circumstances, and ultimately a transition of a different kind. Both pathways are individual by means of progression, however, each imply a transition characterised by developing a sense of who they are and where they might go in life.